It's 2049. It's dusty and red. And Ryan Gosling, of course, has a cool jacket.
I know.
It's Blade Runner time.
Ridley Scott's 1982 sci-fi classic gets a sequel this year, so it's time to look back at the inspiration for the original, Philip K. Dick's 1968 novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
I'm Clint Gage.
I'm Michael Truly.
And without further ado and no restraint on spoilers, it's time to ask, what's the difference? First of all, it should be noted there have been 7 different versions of Blade Runner released in some form. From the 1982 original theatrical release to the 2007 final cut, which is the one we're using, because it's supposedly the only one Ridley Scott had complete creative control over, and also because, why not?
Also, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was turned into a comic book series back in 2009, but they literally put the entire text of the book in there. Normally, we like using the graphic novel stuff, but damn it, there's too many words on there. So we're looking at Philip K. Dick's original novel.
All that to say, Blade Runner falls squarely into the category of inspired by more than based on. Actually, the best way to put it might even be the screenwriters were familiar with the book. The basic premise of the book and movie are the same. A man hunts cutting-edge androids who are illegally hiding out on Earth. But there aren't many similarities beyond that, narratively speaking. They do, however, share a lot of the same ideas.
But let's start with the obvious stuff, like the setting. The book is set in a semi-post-apocalyptic San Francisco. A nuclear war, known as World War Terminus, has left the planet nearly uninhabitable and covered with irradiated dust. Like, so irradiated, dudes even have to wear lead codpieces when they go outside to keep from going sterile. It's changed people's physical appearance, their moods, and some, known as chicken heads, have even had their brains addled by the radiation. Most people on Earth either died during the war or have immigrated to an off-world colony, so some neighborhoods are, kind of lonely.
Ridley Scott's film strips away much of that way-out science fiction framework. Instead, it takes place in Los Angeles in 2019. It's just a dark, rainy, and overpopulated future that doesn't venture much further down the sci-fi rabbit hole than that. Then, we meet the Blade Runner himself. Harrison Ford's Rick Deckard is just minding his own business, grabbing some Chinese food in the rain.
3, 4. No, 4. 2, 4.
He's retired and, I don't know, maybe he's enjoying it, seems kind of crummy, but point is, he's not making his living retiring replicants as a Blade Runner anymore. But soon enough, his old boss strong-arms him back into the job after Deckard's colleague gets blown away by one of the replicants while administering a Voight-Kampff empathy test, the test all Blade Runners use to identify replicants.
In the book, however, Deckard is married. The book opens with he and his wife Iran getting into a spat about what to dial into their mood organs, which are little boxes that allow you to dial up the emotion of your choice.
That is some for real out there sci-fi stuff, dude.
Yeah. Also, Deckard is not retired. He's still hunting androids, still armed with a Voight-Kampff, but he works for the SFPD, and he picks up the bounties on the androids after a colleague is nearly lasered to death. And the terminology is different. The term Blade Runner, for example, doesn't appear in the book at all. In fact, it's a term borrowed from a different book altogether. While this particular model is called the Nexus 6 in both mediums, Book Deckard refers to them as Andes, while the term replicants was an invention by the screenwriters.
Movie Deckard begins his investigation at the Tyrell Corporation, where he meets Eldon Tyrell and Rachel, a highly sophisticated replicant that doesn't know she's a replicant. It takes nearly 100 questions on the Voight-Kampff test for Deckard to figure it out, way more than the usual 30 he claims it takes to spot a replicant.
She's a replicant, isn't she?
I'm impressed.
In the book, Deckard meets with Eldon Rosen of the Rosen Association, where he also meets and tests Rachel. But after a few questions, when Deckard is sure Rachel is a replicant, Eldon and Rachel are like, "Ha, got you! She's totally a real human. She's just crazy because she was born on a spaceship."
Ah, the old I'm a human but I was born on a spaceship routine. A dance as old as androids.
Yep, it was 14 years on a spaceship with minimal human contact that had her testing like an android when she's just a sociopath. But Deckard doesn't buy it. And a few leading questions later, he's like, I got you.
Ah, the old JK, you were right all along. A dance as old as highly evolved androids.
But Rachel, like her movie counterpart, also didn't know that she's an android. Oh, shit. Or at least claims not to know, which makes Deckard feel bad for her, the same way his movie counterpart does.
Weird gotchas aside, this scene does bring up an important similarity between the book and the movie. Empathy. the very thing the Voight-Kampff test measures. In the film, meeting Rachel causes Deckard to look at replicants differently. It's not quite so explicit, but Deckard feels sorry for Rachel as well as the other replicants he's hunting, even drinking himself to sleep after tracking down his next target. He clearly does not feel good about retiring replicants.
The book, however, makes a much bigger deal out of empathy. It's the cornerstone of the almost apocalyptic world of the book. Philip K. Dick's book dives into much more detail about the culture of the post-World War terminus world, and it's all built around empathy. People are obsessed with owning animals, taking good care of them as a sign of just how empathic they are. Deckard's main reason for getting the bounties on the escaped androids is to afford to buy a real goat to replace the electric sheep he and his wife own.
Their religion, known as Mercerism, has people connect to others taking part in the ritual through what seems like a VR simulation. Then you watch Old Man Mercer climb a hill while being pelted with rocks. He gets up to the top of the hill, then falls back down, then starts climbing up again. You feel the pain of the rocks hitting Mercer, but you also feel the joy of everybody you're connected to. Deckard's never cared much for it and always has trouble merging, but his wife, Iran, digs it. The point is, it's a religion based around creating empathy for your fellow man. The other point is, it's not in the movie at all.
What is in both the book and the movie is the rest of Deckard's investigation as he tracks down the other fugitive androids. The biggest difference, however, happens when Deckard runs into a fellow bounty hunter. While tracking an android hiding in plain sight as a famous opera singer, Deckard gets scooped up by a police officer who claims to have never heard of him. The cop even takes Deckard to a police station Deckard's never heard of before to meet a police captain who also indicates that Deckard's whole life has been imagined or hallucinated or worse yet, implanted. And this starts a long series of events where Deckard and I, the humble book half of this episode, began to wonder whether Deckard was either an android himself or possibly just a man gone crazy in the semi-apocalypse.
Turns out it's neither of those. It was a whole pocket of androids who set up a closed-loop system posing as a police department in the middle of San Francisco, trying to pull a fast one. But there's a decent chunk of the middle of the book dedicated to Deckard wondering if he's a replicant or not, even hooking himself up to the Voight-Kampff machine to make sure he's still human. It's even how he discovers that he has indeed developed empathy for the androids.
Ah, the old hook yourself up with electrodes to see if you got the hots for an android routine.
But speaking of hot androids on the run, replicants featured in the movie include Leon, who's super strong,
Wake up! Time to die.
Pris, who's all cartwheely, Zora, who's a snake-themed exotic dancer, and Roy Batty, the combat-ready model who doubles as their leader. They've returned to Earth with plans to track down Eldon Tyrell and force him to extend their 4-year lifespan. They look, think, and act like humans. Why should they not also be given the chance to live as long as humans?
You were made as well as we could make you.
But not to last.
In the book, it's Polakov, a tough and rough android posing as a Russian bounty hunter, Luba Luft, the aforementioned opera singer, Pris, basically the same as the movie one, and Roy and Irmgard, Batty. Whereas movie Roy is a warrior, book Roy is a pharmacist. He and his wife Irmgard lead a fairly normal life on Mars before they decided nobody, not even androids, should have to live in the conditions on Mars. They thought they had as much right to see Earth before they expired as any human, so here they are.
Ultimately, movie Deckard is able to track down the fugitive replicants. He retires Zora, then Rachel helps him out with Leon before he moves on to Pris and a final confrontation with Roy. In the movie, the cat and mouse game through the old Bradbury building and across its rooftops ends with Roy's iconic Tears in the Rain speech, a speech that moves Deckard to fully understand how desperately these replicants want to be human, to live long lives and not be forgotten to history in such a short time.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
So he goes back home, grabs his new replicant Lady Love, and takes off out on the lam.
The final showdown with the androids in the book is a little less climactic. Deckard finds them and retires them all with relative ease, the only difficult one being Pris, who was of the same model as Rachel. You know, his Andy lady fling. During his final hunt, Wilbur Mercer appears to Deckard in some sort of hallucination, warning him that Pris was sneaking up behind him. Deckard, who again never put much stock in Mercerism, is moved to give it another shot. After retiring Roy and Irmgard, Batty, he takes off for an uninhabitable part of the Pacific Northwest. It's there he has a vision, thinking he himself is Wilbur Mercer. He even finds a live toad, so high fives all around for Deckard, I suppose, because everyone thought they were extinct.
Chock full of the religious experience, Deckard hustles home to his wife, proud of himself and his toad, only to find that Rachel had been there just moments earlier and thrown his new goat off the roof. To make things worse, his wife pretty quickly points out that the toad is a fake, an electric simulation of the real deal.
So what does Deckard do when faced with all this hardship? He goes to sleep. He's just like, this, never mind. I got better things to do in my dreams where I could be anything I want. And perhaps the most significant difference between the book and the movie is evident in how they end. In the book, Deckard is stripped of the empathy he's worked hard to foster, making the whole novel about how being human has largely become the same as being an android. You're programmed by a mood organ, the religion in your Mercer empathy box, even the simple task of taking care of an animal becomes your whole existence, just like an android. The humans of the world into androids' dream of electric sheep are imbued with no extra purpose than the very machines they are creating. Boom! Let that resonate in your soul, readers.
Meanwhile, Blade Runner ends on the hopeful note of the dour Rick Deckard finding some solace and some meaning in a relationship with a replicant. But is he himself a replicant? Unclear. Harrison Ford and Ridley Scott have differing opinions, and maybe we'll find out in Blade Runner 2049, but in the meantime, who cares? Blade Runner is a story of replicants wanting to be more like humans, and a Blade Runner, human, replicant, or otherwise, who finally finds some human connection with one of them. And Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep asks the reader if their own life is any different than that of an android.
But interestingly, Deckard may not even be the most clear example of this difference. Let's look at the story of John Isidore, a chickenhead who lives alone in an abandoned apartment building out in what used to be the suburbs. His brain is scrambled by the radioactive dust, and Isidore just mindlessly goes about his day-to-day with no real purpose until the androids show up. Like his movie counterpart, Pris drops into his life, and suddenly, helping out these persecuted androids gives him a job to do and a happier life because of it. He's like a Roomba, spinning around in the corner of your living room until you spill some crumbs for it to come clean up. And then you're like, come here, boy. Who wants to eat? Who wants to eat? Are you hungry? Are you hungry? Eat it up.
Meanwhile, in the movie, Isidore is the inspiration for J.F. Sebastian. He lives alone in the Bradbury building, stuck on Earth because he's got Methuselah syndrome, a glandular disorder that causes him to age too quickly. The unnaturally short lifespan gives him something in common with the replicants that show up at his door, so of course he takes them in.
I don't think there's another human being in the whole world who would have helped us.
So the change in this supporting character mirrors the change in Deckard and the real difference between the book and the movie. Instead of a book about humans finding solace in robotic-like purpose, we get a movie about isolated people finally finding comfort and humanity in the company of androids. That'll do it for this episode of What's the Difference? Make sure to subscribe to CineFix for more, and truly, you mind hooking me up to a Voight Kampf machine for a minute? There's a chance I've got the hots for that robot over there.
Dude, just go talk to her. It/her.
I have to know if it's real first.
I should have stayed gone.